gracious, and God too. It is Friday. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Green Rush Live. I'm Jimmy Young from Pro Cannabis Media.
And I'm David Rabinovich, and we're joined by a great guest today, Bruce Linton.
Well, that's right. And, you know, when David comes up with these theme ideas and he said, we're going to do the art of the deal. And I said, well, the one guy I want to talk to about that is Bruce Linton, who may be has actually maybe created the biggest deal ever in cannabis history at some point. Bruce, welcome back, and it's great to see you.
No, it's good, and congrats on what you've been progressing with yourself, sir.
Appreciate that. So the art of the deal, when you think of that, Bruce Linton, what comes to mind for you?
So it's really weird, but I was on a call, so I'm involved with a bunch of companies now, and they're always trying to do transactions, and transactions or deals fall apart not often because they're a bad idea, but because they take too long and lawyers eat them. And so part of the thing I was saying to this first-time CEO who's trying to do a deal, I said, here's how it actually has to work. You think you agree. And if you don't want to do the details, you make a joint venture. So a joint venture simply says, I'm not sure, but we'll just kick the can on being sure, and we'll have some other governance. We'll set up a board, more overhead, because we don't want to fight today. We don't want to deal with the details. I don't like that. So I said, here's what you have to do. The art of the deal is if you're going to buy a company, we'll talk about getting investment in buying a company. If you're going to buy a company, the first thing you have to get to is what's called the exchange ratio. What's that mean? Well, nobody's buying a company typically for cash. What you're going to do at the result of doing a transaction is that you're going to have a new partner in your business, and they're going to own a certain percentage of it. So if I wanted to buy PCM into my company, we'd be negotiating if you were going to have like 20% or 40% of Bruce Linton Co. That then would turn into an exchange ratio, which means how many of my shares do you get for your shares, because we all have different cap tables. If you cannot agree on that, you don't have a deal. And you should not begin due diligence. You should not begin anything until you agree on that, because once you put that pin in, you freeze that exchange ratio forever. Nobody gets to change it. What it also means is if you're a public company and you want to leak information, and I'm a private company, if we don't have the exchange ratio and I'm just going to be buying you at a future date, you make yourself puffed up. You start to sneak the word out. So the first thing on a deal is make sure you have a deal. Make sure you have an exchange ratio. Because then what you're doing isn't due diligence. You know, when you go poking around the company, you're not doing that to say, do I like this company or not? You said, I like this company. And when you're doing your due diligence, it's what I would call confirmatory. I want to confirm why I like the company, not try to decide if I like the company. If you're buying a company that you think might have intellectual property, so suppose I think you've invented something I don't know, I can never look inside your company directly, otherwise I become blinded. And what I mean by that is if I see your intellectual property directly and personally, down the road, if I don't do the deal, suppose we don't close, you have the capacity to sue me, to litigate, to say that I've actually stolen your ideas. So part of the structure then is you can use a third party. Like we used to use a law firm called Baker's Bots. And what we do is get them to look at, and I've done it since I've left Cannabis, I've used them, I think, 2 or 3 times, look inside the company and write me a report on their intellectual property without telling me exactly what it is, but whether or not you think it's going to stand up to patent fights, et cetera. So there's ways to learn what you're going to get without making it such that you are forced to do the deal because you know stuff that you can't unknow. Does that make sense? You know what I mean? Like don't get in a spot that you've poisoned your own capacity to act. So I think those are kind of key things I pushed on people. Now, if you're going to have money come in, so if you want to have investors, 2 things I learned over the years. One is when someone buys a stock, they have to know when to sell it, right? You don't make a gain unless you exit the equity. And so one of the things I tried on people, and it worked really well, was for about between 11 and 8 months prior to legalization in Canada, every institution I went to, every institution that I wanted to invest, because we always needed money, I would tell them, I think you should sell half or more of the equity in my company 1 month before legalization. I said, well, shit, nobody ever comes here and tells us when to sell. I said, well, it's like a lot of things in life. Anticipation exceeds reality. However, the reality is that that's the instance, right? But if you anticipate something and you stay with it, the reality actually can become better than you expected. Otherwise, nobody stays married. But the key thing is, I said, you should sell my stock, half of it or more, a month before public. I said, well, why? I said, well, that whole story. And they said, well, we don't own it. I said, now I think I can have a meaningful conversation with you about how much you should buy. What percentage of the portfolio you should allocate to me, because you know your exit window. Now let's agree, if you think through what my logic is between now and that window, what's going to happen with legislation, what's going to happen with marketing, what's going to happen with media coverage, what's happening with globalization, why this is going to get super hot. And so I found that if you take a novel approach that provides an exit point, you can often find people who will enter who weren't going to. The final thing is, if you think it's kind of related, and I meant to do that, it's, when did Constellation put their big check in with us? About a month before the actual legalization, because everybody's worried about missing something. And over the medium term, they're already better off. But in the short term, people went, oh, why did you put your money in? Look at it, went up, it went down. Who cares? They know this is not a one-year game. This is a lifetime game. And so they put their cash in long term, but it signaled to the market, get super excited. And so to me, the deal is, usually you want to deal on anticipation rather than factual results, because, you know, every quarter changes. And I even now, like, look at some of the things I'm involved with now. Like, if you look at Gage Cannabis, I got my Cookies hat on, Cookies Detroit. I don't know if you can see it. It's a special limited edition. We began trading on Tuesday. Oh, it comes out of the gate, it goes up, then it goes down a bit. If you're smart enough to play the stock hour by hour, terrific, good to be you. But if you actually said, is Michigan an awesome market? Yep. Is having a leadership position in a state where there are no MSOs very important? Yes. Is having cookies sole and exclusive a very great way to have high value product? Yes. And so if you actually looked in it and said, my goal in stocks is to have 5 that I would like to own a lifetime, right? Like if you said, I really want to pick 5 things that I would like to own for a lifetime, maybe generationally, pass it on. That's how, to me, first you got to say, like, are the people running it that way? So I got involved with Gage purely because when I went to see them, I went around with a guy who'd spent hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars on infrastructure creation, having started off with crappy stuff we built and got better every iteration. What I saw at their place was like version 10 of our stuff. So they were thinking long term. And so, like, when I see stocks trade up and down, I don't like deals that are for a press release. I like transactions that are durable. So that long blabbing, but like, you see a lot of people who want to put out news, right? Oh, we got to get news out. You know how long news lasts? That's why they print it on paper. It's very thin, right? It's news because it's over that day.
Right.
I do not like press releases that are for news, and I don't like deals that, if anybody ever puts a press release out that announces a letter of intent, I would sell that stock instantly. And the reason is, you should only press release those things which are material and concluded, which inform the shareholder of your present state of value. If you put a press release out that says we might do something and people buy the stock and you don't do something, that's a disaster. So I like transactions rather than, you know, deal flow and news. But I really think put a longer term horizon. I think one of the best transactions we did, nobody even still talks about, which was the acquisition of C3, which is the single biggest cannabinoid supplier in Europe, which was a division of a huge company. And they're very clinical, which is very European. And when Canopy puts the results out that says things are going well, I think places like, you know, Storz and Bickel continue to contribute to that. But I think C3 is a big player on that. So, you know, that's it's not as sexy, but it's very durable.
There you go. Wow. I tell you what, I need to start taking notes on just about everything you say. I heard about 40 things in there that made a lot of sense to me. David, I know you were busily working on some ideas, so you got something for Bruce? Go ahead.
No, Bruce, talk to the audience a little bit about some of the SPACs you've been involved with. And if I recall, CGROU was going to be looking at cannabis in Europe and ended up in LiDAR, right?
Yeah. You know, it's sort of like, how do you go out to buy a hemp pizza and come back in a driverless car?
Yeah, that was it. I bought a bunch of that. So
let's begin the story. Special purpose acquisition companies. That's what it is called when it's called the SPAC.
Yep.
And the way it works is you are basically getting as much as you want to put in. So we raised 150 million US dollars and we're traded on NASDAQ. And that capital came from about, I don't know, 20 institutions. And they buy these units. So it's a $10 share price. And what they get for that $10 is a share and a warrant. And the way it works is there's 50 plus days after it starts trading, they can sell the share and keep the warrant. Until then, they're stuck together. So think of it as one thing stuck together till about 54 days. Now it's two things. And so with that one, the people who put in the $10, they know we were looking at trying to do something with hemp. And what I did is we looked at 172 companies. And what we could not find was a single entity which was substantial enough, because if I have $150 million cash, what I need to do is a transaction let's call it $1 billion. And the way that works is I'm not buying you for cash. I'm going to issue more shares and leave the cash in the bank. So after the transaction, the resulting company is publicly listed and has 150 million bucks in the bank. Now, the tricky bit is, so in hemp, there isn't something that big. So you start trying to think about how do I put the pieces together to make something that big? And when you start looking at that, most of the little companies aren't ready to be public, meaning there's an accounting standard called PCAOB, which means you can report reliably your financial statements. So when we looked at all these places, you could maybe put about 5 things together, but then they wouldn't be ready to be public. And so what you have to do is at some point in time and say, well, what have we learned? Well, we learned that cars could be made more lightly, not so heavy. Batteries better if you used hemp. Who's really good at that? BMW. They're very advanced in their technology, as you would expect for BMW. And then you start bumping into things, and it turns out the LiDAR company called Innoviz that we ended up doing the deal with is being built into the BMW cars. And if you bought a BMW electric car made in Germany, up to 21% of it's already made with hemp. And so you start saying, oh, that's kind of interesting. And then you say, well, who's the principal builder that's going to take the LiDAR system from Innoviz and put it in with BMW? And it's a Canadian company called Magna. They'd invested early in Innoviz. Well, because Canada's a small place, like if you said, do you know Joe from Canada? I probably do. And so it turns out like with one phone call, I can have a call with the CEO of Magna. And I can ask a bunch of questions about why did you put the money in? Would you wish you had to put more in or less in that so you can do your due diligence? And so what we realized was that this was probably, in my opinion, the most ready to be in market system being built into BMW cars right now that could go forward. And Elon made the right decision when he did his deals. He didn't have this technology at this price point. But with this stuff, he'd be wildly crazy not to upgrade to it. And so this looked like, to me, the winner, the leader, the potential to have drones to this, to tractors, to trailers being driven around with driverless. And it's out of Israel. It's super engineers who've done a bunch of things. So we did a transaction with them. And everyone who bought those $10 units sold the stock in January or so, because they could keep the warrant worth, say, $3, sell the stock for, say, $15, $16, $17. And now the warrant's worth maybe $3 to $4, and they think it's terrific. They wish I'd do another one. Now, one thing I should add, all those unit holders, if they didn't like the deal, could have voted in favor of it and asked for their $10 back, which would have meant Innoviz had no money. So the trick of the trade is that on top of your SPAC, your special purpose acquisition company, what you have to do is a secondary financing, which we did in January, called a PIPE. A PIPE stands for Private Investment in Public Equity. And so the effect of that is we raised, and the guys did an amazing job. I barely was a part player. I'd show up and say, hi, I'm Bruce, kind of thing in these meetings. But they raised $232 million, I think was the final number. And that money for sure stays in the account. So when we started trading on Tuesday, they had over $300 million cash, a liquid stock, and are off to the races. And it was terrific because usually you have 24 months to do it. And we started trading on March 1st or May 1st, 2020. And as of Tuesday, so 4 or 5 days ago, they are listed and going. So it was quite a short time that we took to do that. And I almost did a second one. Like I might still, but I probably won't, because there's now been 600 or 700 of these things put out there, like celebrities and sports people. They're all making SPACs. And what's going to happen is, I think there's going to be a log jam. And what I mean by that is in about 6, 8, 10, 12 months, all these guys are going to be running around saying, oh my God, I'm going to lose all my money. in another year if I don't do a deal, and they're going to give away everything to do a deal. And so what I'm thinking about is, how do I make a company? How do I put together the pieces I thought of before to make a company, so when these dum-dums are all out of time with all their cash, we can come in and help them not lose all their money, but we can make a whack of money by stepping in with a great company. And so SPACs are a very funny thing, but it's basically, Jimmy, here's the deal. They said, Bruce, we're going to give you $150 million. We're going to give you a liquid currency. Do you think you can make a deal? Jimmy, if I can't make a deal with those two combinations, please take my hat, take my glasses, take my computer. I'm retired.
Would you shave too? Would you shave too?
No, I'm going to a nursing home. I'm done. It's over. Like, you got a liquid stock and you got cash and you can't do a deal? Come on.
I guess so. Hey, hemp or cannabis? Which future is bigger and brighter in your estimation around the world?
So hemp, as designated to mean the stalk and fiber part, as well as the protein potential, is game changing on supply chains to create everything from the clothes you're wearing to the car you're driving. Game changing.
Right.
And it's going to change the agricultural landscape in America. It's going to change the sources of protein. So it's game changing. It's going to have a different margin model because you don't pay a zillion bucks for the bumper on your car, but it will change fiberglass to hemp. It has more categories of impact. I think the whole cannabis plant and all those cannabinoids, we saw the Jazz acquisition of GW, the potential for all of these things we call rare cannabinoids to become pharmaceutical components and ingredients, pet care. I think that is maybe not as big in total absolute dollars, but way bigger in profits. And, you know, just the global macro trade, like, we're going to, in our lifetime, in almost every country on the planet, cannabis will be regulated. And when I say regulated, it'll either be medical or rec. And it's just because ignoring it is bad public policy. You do not make money as a government ignoring shit. That's right. And it's listen, there's three things to cannabis. They regulate, they tax, and they educate. That's all they're doing. Regulation, taxation, and education. And they have to do the education. They don't want to, but they can't make it look like Jimmy, when he was in grade 8, was going to go get stoned because they didn't educate. So they have to educate in order to cover their ass on the taxation. And so there's no governments, unless they have super deep oil fields in the Middle East or something, that don't need access to the flows of capital. So I think it's going to be, it's going to happen. And people go, well, listen, when New York State regulates, ask everybody on the planet, name one city in America, you're going to have like a 98% hit rate on New York as a city most people would reference. And New York as a city and a state is a globally iconic element. It has the media outlets that are covered. As this rolls out and people still show up at Wall Street and work, you know what's going to do? That is the sea change. It's not Colorado. It's not California. It's not some weird little state. This is New York. And I still find that it's been underreported in terms of, I think, the global impact of that decision on the public policy of the world.
Well, they're talking about creating a $4.2 billion industry in New York and looking at $350 million in tax revenue annually in that state alone. So how do you ignore that? You don't ignore it. It actually is moving the needle at every state. Almost every state in the union these days is looking at a way to get more tax revenue, to bounce back, have their economy bounce back. I mean, you talk about the perfect storm. It's the perfect storm of reality right now for the cannabis reform movement, because it can cure so many things, right?
Well, and when you say cure, most people who go to a doctor, the doctor studied at a time before the endocannabinoid system was actually validated as existing. And so I guarantee you those numbers do not capture the potential intellectual property torque and pharmaceutical value that's going to happen at Columbia and NYU and all the universities that have hospitals that can. So, like, think about it. Like, your doctor was educated around the same time as somebody went, you know, there's this thing, I'm pretty sure, called an endosystem. And so, like, when people say, well, we don't have medical, we don't have I said, for God's sakes, like, most doctors didn't even know the existence of this when they were in their academic fields. So, like, those numbers do not capture the torque. And, you know, I think when you think about the corridor on the East Coast between Massachusetts and New York, the potential for those institutions of, I'll call it pharma creation, the evolution of what these things are, the inspiration, they're just going to crush it. And I fundamentally think that, like, I'm a broken record on it, but if you can get somebody to have the munchies when they have an oncology treatment, that's unbelievable.
Right.
You can also, therefore, I suspect, pull the button and cause people to have a suppressed appetite without triggering the liver. So when you start to think about, like, what are the potential appetite suppression, weight loss, sleep, like, most things that we treat are because we all get too fat. Like, I had high blood pressure. You know why? I was 30 pounds fatter than I am now. You know what I found out is you have less blood pressure when you're less fat. So, like, all these things are going to start to weave together where we start thinking about inflammation, weight control, all of the expression of those things in terms of medical ailments. If you could just treat, like, COVID made me lose weight. Why? Because I wasn't on the road. Like, I tried to deny myself nothing. Like, if you go to a restaurant and they're famous for making something, you should probably have two of them. And so, being at home, and like this restaurant, I told my wife I'm going to give the restaurant like 2 stars on TripAdvisor because I've been here for like 13 months and I've never at lunch been offered, would you like fries or salad? It's always salad. It's a very bad TripAdvisor review, but all of the things that we could do with cannabinoids that I think will cause people to actually have a more healthy life state will then cause all of these things as we get older. Like, the biggest market that's going to be impacted short term, I'll call it communal living, geriatric care. All these folks that died in long-term care facilities, we're also now saying, what the hell actually goes on in there? Like, how do you run them? What do you feed them? What medicines are they on? What exercise do they get? And so I think when we look at that, we're going to say, what, you're giving people like 3 or 4 drugs a day to deal with anxiety and mobility and appetite. Why don't we use cannabis? Right. $740 billion business just looking after old folks.
Right. And the fastest growing demographic group is the 50+ group in the cannabis space right now. Hey, Bruce.
Yeah, and you know what, Jimmy, if you want to bring cannabis successfully to, say, Japan, talk about how you help the people who are a little bit older.
Right.
You want to bring cannabis successfully to, say, the Middle East, talk about how you help horses recover from races and workouts. Because the horse population there, super well thought of, extraordinarily expensive, and a way in the door. So there's going to be on-ramps that are different by place, but they're not going to be all people rolling a joint.
I get you. Hey, I'm looking at the clock. Can you stick around for a little while to join the next half hour? Or do you have to run?
I'm good for like another 10, 15 minutes. With the amount you pay me, man, I just got to keep staying.
Hey, Jimmy.
Yes,
let's just double his speaking fee for today, and let's keep him for another half hour.
All right, I want to know.
I can stay for at least another 15, and then I actually have a call with some Australians at 5. I got to get ready for.
Fantastic. All right, I get that. So we do take a break at 4:20, and I get to talk about the origination of the Waldos and the guys from San Rafael, California, who used to meet at the Louis Pasteur statue. You know the whole origin, right, Bruce?
Snoop Dogg puts it out there every day.
I love that. Well, I do it every week at 4:20, but I tie it back to my own experience because here in the Boston area of Massachusetts, we used to listen to an AM daytimer back in the day that was alternative rock called WCAS AM 740. And they used to play this song Shanty by Jonathan Edwards. Now, do you know the song Shanty, Bruce?
I'm ready to hear it. I hope you got it queued up.
Yeah, of course we have it queued up. We're going to play it. You're going to listen to it. You're going to love it. The guy lives in New Hampshire to this day, and he's performing it at a radio studio in New Hampshire. We'll come back with more of Bruce Linton, and then we're going to add in a few more of these guys to the fun as we talk about the art of the deal on the Green Rush. Don't go away.
Yeah, this is a tune that I wrote back in 19... I've forgotten. We had a saying in our old band, one of my first bands in 1966 or so. What are you going to do tonight? Oh, just... like every other night, just going to lay around the shanty and put a good buzz on. down in the kitchen, fix me something good to eat. Make my head a little high, make the whole day complete. Gonna lay around the shanty, oh mama, and put a good buzz on. Pass it to me, baby, pass it to me slow. We'll take time out to smile a little before you let her go. We're gonna lay around the shanty, oh mama, and put a good buzz on. Oh, yeah. Oh, you're on something. Go ahead. Rick Brodsky, everybody. There's nothing to do and there's always room for more. Fill it, light it, shut up and close that door, baby. We're gonna lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on. Take it, okay. Prohibition never works, it's time to realize it. It grows in my backyard, it's time to legalize it. We're gonna lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on. I'm gonna sit down in my rented car. I'm gonna jam it into drive. Gonna head on and play at WSCA with Sean. I'm glad I'm alive. We're gonna lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on. Every night and day, we're gonna lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on.
Hi, I'm Ben Shire, New England rep for Salient Video Management Systems. Let me tell you what makes us different in the security space. We're your trusted advisors for all your security needs. I know how complicated the regulations are in cannabis, and working with Salient Systems will be the polar opposite of that. I give free consultations and will walk you through every step of the process so that you can get what you need at the price you can afford. We're robust, we're simple and scalable. We're Salient Systems, your solutions to all your security needs. Please contact me at the information below, and I'm looking forward to being your trusted advisor.
And we are joined with one of our favorite guests, Morgan Fox of the NCIA.
Hello again, guys.
Hey, how are you?
I'm doing really well.
Good. Is everything under control in Washington, D.C.? Because it's been normally quiet this week. Am I wrong?
I mean, when is it ever?
Right.
But in terms of cannabis, I think that we're kind of stuck in a wait and see pattern. Both waiting on the reintroduction of the Schumer bill the introduction of the Schumer bill in the Senate, which all the sponsors keep saying will happen, quote, very soon, which has been stretching on and on and on. Everybody's waiting with bated breath. We are looking at the reintroduction of the MORE Act in the House early next week. So that's really exciting. And, we can't wait to see what the actual language of that bill is. We think that there will be some changes from the version that the House passed in December. The only changes that we know of really for certain are that an amendment that would have allowed federal regulators and license authorities to basically deny federal business licenses to people who had had state level felonies of any sort will be removed, which is excellent because that really flies in the face of the purported social justice bent of this particular bill. But also, we're hearing that there might be a change to the provision related to Small Business Administration loans that will actually expand the scope from what was passed by the House last year to basically mean that people who have been most impacted by the war on drugs, as well as women and people of color, will have a special consideration for SBA loans for any type of business they want to open, not just cannabis businesses.
Oh, that's good news. I think anything that they could do to actually infuse interest loaning from banks is a good thing in any business. So let me ask you a question: how this works? The MORE Act exists. You talk about amendments to that act, and I believe it was then Senator Kamala Harris who was involved with the MORE Act, wasn't she?
The lead sponsor to taking over the office of vice presidency.
There you go. So chances are she might actually get a little involved with this, or because she's vice president, they don't get her involved unless there is a 50-50 split in the Senate and she has to come in and make the deciding vote.
Well, in terms of being a tiebreaker in the Senate, she'll absolutely be involved. But behind the scenes, I'm pretty confident that she's going to be nudging Biden to at least not obstruct any of the descheduling legislation that might come across his desk, as well as incremental legislation, if that happens to pass through Congress before a larger and more comprehensive bill. But there are going to be a really interesting politics in play. That the MORE Act is going to be a real easy lift in, but I don't know if it wants to move immediately. And I think that the House is going to wait until they can see what Chuck Schumer's bill looks like in the Senate, can really get a better feel for what sort of negotiations they're going to have to do, both with the House as well as the Senate. Once, fingers crossed, both chambers pass these scheduling bills. But either way, the votes are clearly there. I mean, they were there last December, and I think that we're only getting more Republican support this year. Weird partisan politics aside, depending on how like McCarthy and McConnell crack the whip. But really, I think that we're in a really good position now to be able to debate some of the details about what a good descheduling and regulation bill looks like. Unfortunately, to my knowledge, nobody has really seen what or at least among the activist community, has really seen what the new and improved MORE Act is going to look like beyond what we saw passed already and beyond what we've heard about those two items that I mentioned earlier. There could be more. We're really hoping to see a robust regulatory structure included in the new improved and I think we're going to have to wait until Tuesday to find out whether or not that's the case. And if no regulatory structure, we're going to be pushing for one very strongly, as well as trying to push for continuation or improvement upon any of the restorative justice provisions that exist in that bill.
Right. When you talk about amendments and regulatory, are we going to see a real workforce development program? In other words, something that is in this law that not only gives those who've been most impacted by the war on drugs an opportunity to get into business, but also learn the business and to actually learn how to run a business. And that's something I know David is very active in.
I'd love to see it. I tend to think that those sort of things will be dealt with at the state level much more than the federal level. I would love to see funding provided at the federal level for such programs at the state level. Similarly, with expungement. The vast majority of arrests and prosecutions and convictions for cannabis take place at the state level. It's at the non-zero and not insignificant amount of people that are facing or have been convicted of federal charges, but it pales in comparison to the state level. So even though we might be talking about expunging federal charges and working on some sort of federal programs in terms of public education and job training and things like that, what I would like to see is money specifically set to filter down into the state programs, particularly when it comes to it, because some states have been able to just green light this and move forward with expungements. Illinois has been a great example of that, and some districts in California. Other states are either dragging their feet or they really have the resources to be able to just do it for free for everybody. And I know personally, in states like Ohio, it can cost thousands of dollars to get your records expunged, and that's not something that a lot of people can do. So to fund those sort of efforts at the federal level, providing funds to trickle down to the state level would be really, really useful. We'll see exactly what that looks like, hopefully next week.
And when you say no one amongst the lobbyists and the activists actually have a chance to see the final draft of these things, who do they share it with internally, or is it really well kept secret amongst the elected officials, as they say?
Well, I mean, at least, and I'm not in these meetings on a day-to-day basis. That's more of our government relations team. But from what I understand from being on the Hill for closing in on 15 years now, that lawmakers and their offices will reach out to stakeholders a lot for input, and very rarely will they share what they're doing with that input. It does happen. But quite often what you get is sort of a very one-way street right up until the actual language is finalized, and then it starts to become a little bit more two-way.
So there's hope on the horizon as we enter the weekend, and then next weekend, and America's opening up now a little bit. People are double vaccinated. I think something like 60% of Americans right now, which is certainly trending in the right direction. Getting back to business as usual in Washington, D.C., is this a good thing for the is this a good thing for the cannabis advocacy movement? Because really and truly, that's what most people want to know. It's like, when is cannabis going to be legalized in this country, or at least decriminalized? That's what that's the number one trending question in the SEO world, by the way.
Well, I mean, to be completely honest, I think it's impossible to really predict exactly what's going to happen. I mean, outside of cannabis, there are numerous important world issues and domestic issues happening that Congress and the administration have to deal with. And as we've discussed, the show that support for cannabis policy reform is very broad, but pretty shallow. It usually does not rise to a high priority level for a lot of people, even though, especially if you're looking at criminal justice reforms, it's not necessarily something that is going to have massive impact compared to things like sentencing reform or getting rid of mandatory minimums. But it is sort of a cornerstone of our failed criminal justice system that is going to have to be addressed, and it's one that can be fairly easily addressed. Really, the question is how it gets prioritized by Congress. What I'm seeing right now is sort of picking up where we left off in 2020 in terms of momentum. We started out the beginning of 2020 seeing pretty big hearings about cannabis policy reform in January. And then, we started seeing more movement for bills, and then the pandemic hit. So we didn't really see any progress on cannabis bills until December. Well past the election, past a lot of, politically sensitive times and politically sensitive issues. So now in 2021, that pace is starting to pick back up again. And I expect that to continue. But again, a lot of things can happen, and cannabis isn't the only issue that Congress is dealing with.
Absolutely not. David, you got a question for Mr. Morgan here?
Well, my not just yet, Jimmy, because my question, I'm going to ask him if he has any thoughts on this whole Delta 8 controversy.
Oh, yeah, that's an interesting one. I don't know how much controversial it is. A lot of states are banning Delta 8 THC.
Right.
Well, I think that bans are probably the wrong way to go. I mean, we've seen that prohibition doesn't work. However, there's really not too much research at all about what the substance does. It's only found in very, very minuscule amounts in the plant naturally. And this is really the first time in human history that it's been synthesized from existing cannabinoids and consumed by humans in greater concentrations and larger amounts. So we really don't exactly know what it does to people, short term, long term. A lot of the anecdotal evidence suggests that at least the inebriating or psychoactive effects are similar to Delta-9 THC, but without some of the paranoia. Don't really know what it does to the human body really at all. When you add that to the fact that I've talked to a lot of people who have been testing Delta-8 samples from around the country, and almost all of them come up with massive amounts of impurities and unknown concentrations of substances. It really presents a lot of really sticky issues. Plus, add that to the fact that it's not regulated at all. So, I mean, somebody could be in a basement laboratory and selling it on the internet to people that are under the age of 18. It presents a lot of problematic things that could, not only harm consumers, but also could set the movement to legalize cannabis back by years if there turn out to be negative health impacts. So our position is that Delta-8 should be regulated the same way that Delta-9 is under various state laws, as well as under federal laws, such as the Farm Bill, until we know more about it. And, that is probably problematic for a lot of businesses that have been unable to sell their massive stockpiles of CBD because the FDA has been unwilling to actually get off their butts and regulate the substance, and are realizing that they can convert CBD into Delta-8 and be able to actually salvage some of their crop produce. It's very problematic, and it's very tight line to walk. But the bottom line is you really have to look out for consumer safety, and we just don't know enough about this at all. But once again, this comes down to problems associated with prohibition. Right. The fact that the FDA has not been able to effectively regulate CBD yet, especially in terms of food additives and things like that, means that people are sitting on stockpiles and they don't know what to do with it. The fact that the vast majority of states in this country still do not regulate or have legal access to Delta-9 THC means that people in states like Texas or Indiana or Idaho who don't have legal access to Delta-9 THC products are looking for a supposedly legal and readily available alternative. Unfortunately, it's one that people don't know a whole lot about. And this sort of is the same sort of thing that we with like spice and K2 and other synthetic cannabinoids. The DEA had sort of an analog system set up where, when you make something illegal, innovative and resourceful chemists and scientists and breeders will come up with an alternative. And then the DEA will ban that and make that Schedule 1. And then they have to tweak those molecules a little bit. And every time you tweak it, it's turning into something else that nobody really has any knowledge of what the effects are on the human body. So it really creates a nasty catch-22 that could be completely solved by making cannabis legal.
It certainly could. And, while we sit here and think that this is rational thinking, okay, keep in mind that the plant actually grows a lot faster than bureaucracy moves, right? I mean, that's true, right? Research continues to be stalled because of its classification. They're doing everything, they being those in charge, let's just leave it at that, are doing everything they can to slow down the progress so that they get it right, or more importantly, actually have to learn about it more so they can learn more and actually get it right when they finally come out with this. I don't have as much confidence that the people that are sitting in these positions now government actually care that much about it, so I don't pass on it anyway. That being said, I look at and I thank God it's Friday, and I thank God that we're only a few minutes away from 420. Okay, because that's when we take our break, Morgan, and it also allows me to pontificate a little bit about why I'm wearing this T-shirt. Now, true story, and then there's a convenient story about this. I happened to get this T-shirt in the mail today out of the blue from some friends involved with the Student Television Network, which is a great organization for high school students. They go every year to a convention and they show their best stuff. And obviously the theme of this year's convention that was virtual was Tell the Story. And doesn't that remind you of something, David? What else is about telling the story that's involved with the green rush? I'm setting you up for this, David.
You're the new Green Rush promotion on Tell the Story.
That's right.
Tell us, Jimmy.
And you could win with your story. This is a really cool cannabis storage device. And we're going to be solicit people's stories on text or via video. And you could win one of the storage units. Notice it's missing one. I know where that is. And this one here is the bottom of it. And it's all like great aluminum canisters. So it's very, very light and also very sturdy, smell proof and child proof. Perhaps the most important thing too. As it turns out, Morgan, I'm going to hope you on just a minute. We actually got 2 stories submitted already this week. We announced it last Friday. We've got a couple of stories. We're going to urge people again to go to procannabismedia.com's website and enter your story. Tell us your story because I can actually read it on the air and you might win a prize or you might win a t-shirt or you actually might be invited on this show to tell your story and to talk more about cannabis. And I'm going to tell you 2 stories. Is that okay? Morgan, can you hang out for just a couple more minutes?
You can hang out for a couple of minutes. I'm going to wait to share my story again until maybe the next time, but or submit it through the official channels.
Well, and by the way, even though you are affiliated with Pro Cannabis Media, you are not part of the family because you're here to promote what you do. You're the communications director of the NTIA. All you're doing is doing your job. That being said, I'm not going to mention last name, but Cody has cerebral palsy. This was the first one that came in. I use cannabis to help with my palsy. I really, really believe cannabis can help people with different disabilities. Cannabis is a new miracle drug. It really helps out a lot, and we are still finding out what else it can do. I believe cannabis needs to be legalized in Congress. I have no idea who this kid is, but it's an awesome story. One right after that, after attending UMass Amherst for 4 years, I saw everything that marijuana shouldn't be. I saw buds covered in mold in multiple dorm rooms and apartments. I saw people filling cartridges with stuff they barely knew. When cannabis became legal in Massachusetts, I started practicing my own growing with a legal 12-plant home grow. My fuel was that I wanted to create a product that resembles how the cannabis plant was intended to be, not grown for profit, but for quality meds, giving the plant its best possible chance of growing to its full potential. This practice helped me land a job at a facility in Rhode Island for medical marijuana cultivation. X number of years later, now pursuing a delivery-only license in Massachusetts under the Social Equity Program. I'm very confident that I will have a lifelong career with this plant, and my intention is not for profit, but for creating the most quality product available for people who need it. Man, doesn't that make you feel good for all the sweat equity you put into this cause down in Washington, right, Morgan?
Absolutely. Those are the stories I love hearing. I mean, that's what gets me up in the morning.
And we have the amazing is I got a lot of people telling their stories on our show that's in the weeds. And we're going to start putting them all together and sharing them on shows like the Green Rush Live, because this is one live show we do every week. So, Morgan, as always, thank you. The next time means that I believe is scheduled for the 3rd Friday in June, correct?
That's right.
Unless something breaks, and then you're always there for us, Jake. Hi, I'm Jimmy Young from Pro Cannabis Media. And you know, when I started Pro Cannabis Media 2 years ago, I wanted to make sure the cannabis industry had a professional outlet to share their stories in their own words. Now, since it all started with my podcast In the Weeds 3 years ago, I've done over 250 interviews. I've met some incredible people with a shared passion for this amazing plant. And I can't tell you how many times I've heard the line, cannabis has saved my life, cannabis has changed my life. Well, now it's your turn. We want to give you a chance to tell your own story. It doesn't even need to be related to the medicinal power of this incredible plant. Just to give you a little incentive, we will pick 5 stories to share on our live Green Rush show on Fridays at 4 p.m. Eastern. If we share your story, you automatically get one of our t-shirts with that closing line I use all the time. It's a whole new world of weed. But As the legendary Billy Mays used to say, that's not all. One of those finalists will win one of these really cool full-story cannabis storage units. It's a great way to store your cannabis in their food-grade aluminum containers. It's award-winning, child-proof, smell-proof, and has a solid contemporary design. It's a $220 value, but you can win one if we pick your story and feature it on our show. Yes, we will pick one of those 5 finalists, and they will receive this $220 value absolutely free. Now, we ask you to keep your story to under 90 seconds on video and less than 500 words in text. So come out of the cannabis closet and tell us your story, and you could win with yourstory.com. Just go on to procannabismedia.com and sign up today. You might even join us on one of our shows. David, if you'd like to do that, you can. You want to welcome us back to the show?
And we're back.
Very good, David. I'm going to train you into being a host sooner than later. That's David Rabinovitz. I'm Jimmy Young. This is The Green Rush, and we are focused on veteran entrepreneurs and veterans in the cannabis business. And when it comes to that subject, I love to hear from Ann Brum from a joint venture, and also Stephen Mandilli, who is a regular, if you will, on our shows. I think he's been on almost every show we do. So we have them both here in the forum with us. First of all, Ann, tell us a little bit about a joint venture. We are still waiting, by the way, on a representative to join us. But Ann, fill up some time. Tell us a little bit about a joint venture and what you're up to.
Sweet. Yes. Joint Venture and Co. Thank you very much, first of all, Jimmy and David, for welcoming this conversation, which is important with veterans in the cannabis space and hemp space, and the value of investing into veterans and their families as a part of our development of this industry, both plant touching and ancillary. So thank you very much for welcoming the conversation. It's always great to collaborate with you, Jimmy, and your team on being able to come up with some beautiful content and hopefully make an impact with all the viewers who are watching this live and on the reruns here. So good evening, everyone. My name is Ann Brum. I'm the CEO and founder of a small agency known as Joint Venture & Co. We're based in Massachusetts. And we serve the New England as a region. However, our campaigns have affected nationwide. And we tend to focus on different communication, branding, and initiatives. So anything to do with that, we tend to really want to create, curate, and execute on. And I'm psyched to be able to have our colleague, Stephen, who is joining Joint Venture and has been since late 2020. And he's really leading our front when it comes to our legislative and veteran affairs, and really offering amazing insight consulting for those areas of expertise. And I'm so thankful to have had Stephen join the team. So thanks, Stephen, as well.
And Stephen, I think we have your representative friend, Michael Soder, with us. At least I see him in the waiting room, and now I see him on our forum room. So that's good. Representative Soder, thank you so much for joining us here today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. How are you?
How are you? Nice. I'm Jimmy Young from Pro Cannabis Media. David Rabinovitz is also in the room. He's with MassCan and Cannaventure. Yep. But let's cut right to the chase, guys. I understand that there's a bill in the Massachusetts Senate that is going to actually define medical marijuana conditions for veterans. Is that accurate?
So the bill, there's one bill out there now. It is has a docket number and everything. It is HD 323. That bill will do 3 things. First, it will create a separate pathway for veterans to become registered in the medical cannabis program here in Massachusetts. And the 2 other things would be adding conditions to the list of opioid use disorder as well as post-traumatic stress disorder. We believe that putting those conditions out front will help break stigma, and also make sure people, recognize those conditions and see them listed, and then continue seeking out help with medical cannabis. As far as PTSD goes, we are the only New England state that does not have that listed on our medical program, which, I see you shaking your head now. It makes no sense. I think there's only 6 out of the, I believe, 33 states now that have medical that also don't have that listed. So I think, we should be ahead of the curve on that. And the same with opioid use disorder. Marijuana, cannabis was given, the title of being a gateway drug. I see it as an exit way drug. It was for myself and thousands of other veterans in Massachusetts and even more across the country. So if I can go back to the first part of that bill, where we would create a new pathway. So this isn't looking to diminish or take away any paths that a veteran might want. If they want to go seek a doctor and talk to a doctor, they can still do that. But for veterans that maybe are uncomfortable going outside of the VA or have already, been a patient, they may see that they could handle it themselves, as there's not being any sort of prescribed dose or anything like that. It's really reliant on the veteran and knowing themselves and being the patient. And this is something, I've had the fortune of having a state legislator that I've known for years through my family, my mother, working at the Bellingham Town Hall for I think close to a decade now. But Representative Soder has such a commitment to veterans. I mean, I'd hate to blow up his spot and say he has an open door policy for veterans, because I don't want to flood his office. But I mean, he cares about his constituents, and not only cares to listen, but cares to follow through with action. And I approached him about this and wanting to help my sisters and brothers in arms, that are facing so many problems right now. We have a veteran suicide crisis. We have a veteran overdose crisis. And I'm just, out of desperation, just looking for things that are helpful. And cannabis, with having no overdose deaths reported in history, and being a lot safer than a lot of those other medications, I wanted to make it as accessible as possible. And, on top of working with Representative Soder, I've had the fortune of working with Ann and Joint Venture Co. and some other organizations that are really dedicated to veterans issues. And we did a year-long study back in 2019, which feels like decades ago now.
Along with PhD Dr. McNabb as well.
Yep. And, we surveyed veterans, and we want to know, what's the barrier to your access? And, we took that information, and now we're trying to remove those barriers. Top barriers were cost of product, availability of product, cost of getting a card, and also owning a firearm. Those were the top 5. And we also have a second bill in the House that is HD 703, which is an act preserving Second Amendment rights for medical marijuana patients. Those something very important as a patient. As someone that's trying to heal, you shouldn't have to give up constitutional rights to do so. There may not be any activity now for anyone trying to do anything, but in the past in Hawaii, they worked with federal agents, and money and resources went to helping bust people for cannabis. So we're looking to be able to stop that before it happens, and say, why didn't we do that? And all these bills are, not trying to reinvent the wheel here. So I've done research on a lot of different states and trying to find the best of what's going on now. And we're just piggybacking on that. And these seem like things that you would think are automatically done, but you've got to do the research and be aware of what's going on. And I want to help other veterans to do that. And that's why I've joined Ann and Joint Venture Co. to be able to guide veterans on, hey, you have this ability. We all have this ability. I mean, even if you're not a veteran, you're a constituent. You have elected officials. They work for you. If you don't reach out to them, they have no idea what you need. So just really trying to help, educate and inform other veterans on this process, because I feel like these bills should be in every state, and that only happens by residents in those states bringing them forward.
Well,
and their representatives. like
I mean,
Representative
representative,
Soda
yeah.
here today.
let's bring in our representative here. What an intro for you, Representative Soder. I believe you're from the Worcester. You represent the Worcester area. Is that accurate?
8th Worcester District, which is Blackstone, Bellingham, Uxbridge, and Blackstone, Bellingham, Millville, and Uxbridge. That's the 8th Worcester District in the state legislature. And it's great to be teaming up on these bills. And it's also great that I am going to be on cannabis policy. Steve is going to have a friend on the committee for cannabis policy. So it's actually very good. And Steve's a great advocate. I have to tell you, I've done a complete 180 from when Steve and I met first back, was it Steve, 6 years ago, maybe? And Steve has shown me a path that is very, very important, not only to our veterans, but to most importantly to cannabis policy with our veterans. And that's what we have to focus on.
So you said you're on the policy committee in the State House. Is that?
Yeah, cannabis policy. Yep.
And who else? Can you share who else is on that committee as far as representatives?
So the new chair is the new chair for that committee is Dan Donahue. Ranking minority member is Representative Frost from Auburn, and I'm going to be joining in the minority Representative Frost. I believe State Senator Sanchez Diaz is on that committee also. So we've got some new thought process going into this committee, and I think that's good for everybody. I just reached out to the chairman today and told him that I'm excited about working with him, and we need to I think we have to approach cannabis in a way that is we have to look at cannabis in a way that is so much different than what we all think it is. I guess that's the way we have to retrain our thought process on it. And I think that Steve has brought that to the forefront with me. We talk constantly. And I think that we can actually get some things done. And I think, the bills that we put forward have some ground to stand on, which is, I think, is what everybody wants when we're filing legislation at the beginning of the session.
Okay. David, are you ready to jump in here?
Not yet, Jimmy. You keep going.
I want to know where the pushback is, Representative Soder. I really want to know how in the world, at this point, we're 8 years into the medical program in Massachusetts. Okay, and I've been a card carrier since its inception, but I never had to worry about PTSD and go through the opioid withdrawal situation that Stephen's gone through. Who's fighting this against you? That's what I want to know.
Well, I mean, I think, I'm going to be honest with you. I mean, there were people like me who probably fought against it early on, and then as you have to, one thing I learned about life in general is you have to look at every issue and take into account every issue. And I think the problem is that there still are some people up there in Boston that just need to really just kind of listen to the facts about this. And I think that's where the problem is. I think some people want to placate to a certain group, and they don't want to give in so easily to the whole process of this. But you got to look at everything from a 10,000 foot perspective. You can't just look at everything from a standard of just that, well, this is what I believe in. You're never going to change my mind. You can't do that. And we still have some of that up there. I have a lot of feelings about this, and there's going to be things that I'm going to be looking at from a cannabis policy perspective. One of the things that, and I haven't discussed this with Steve yet, but we got 18-year-olds and 19-year-olds and whatnot going into the military that we have no problem sending them to war.
Right.
But and if we send them at a very young age, we say, oh, it's okay to handle some of the most sophisticated weaponry that we have in our in the world. But when they kill, or when they come back from that battle, we can't say, well, you're 18 and 19 and you've been in war, you've been there, you've been doing what you got to do, the country asks you to do what they're going to do, but you know what, you can't do this because you're not 21.
Yeah, I happen to agree with you on a lot of that, but I think there should be a line in the sand. I lived when we had the drinking age at 18, and somewhere between 78 and 81, they upped it to 21. And it happened while I was in the middle of it, but it didn't impact me. And I get why I did some of that, but I buy into if you're a veteran and you go off to war, you come back, you deserve additional rights, right?
Of course you do.
Right. If you're honorably discharged, that the 18 should be the age for you. If you were old enough to go into the military and you went and you served honorably, everything else should be open to you when you come back. I can see keeping it at 21 beyond that for people who don't serve, but I think
in the private sector.
Yeah, right. If you're going to make that step and serve and serve honorably, you shouldn't come back and be told you're too young.
Right. I agree with that, and that's kind of what I feel about this, is that when we look at the opioid addiction and we look at the opioid crisis, I think a lot of it starts with these painkillers and these Oxycontin and all this stuff. It starts there. And when you think about cannabis in the sense that what it can do without an addiction result, because there is no addiction result, I'm convinced of that. I think that we need to seriously take a look at that, and especially those that are serving at 18 for our country and will put their lives on the line for our country. I mean, God, look at this pandemic. I mean, the pandemic, from a sense of like, okay, let's open every liquor store in the world and not, but we're going to restrict marijuana facilities. Do you know what that did to the psyche of the people that rely on cannabis from a medical standpoint, from just a personal standpoint? And a lot of people don't like the stigma of the medical aspect of it. So they have their card to go to the private end of it, which is the dispensaries, so they don't have to register and do what they got to do. So I think that I've evolved on this issue. I believe in natural ways of healing and natural ways of putting things in our body, and quite frankly, I mean, Steve, from a standpoint of Steve, when we first met, I mean, I know Steve and I know Steve's family. And the great thing about that is that, there's a lot of things that we, when you listen just to Steve's story, there's 1,000 other people like Steve, millions of other people like Steve.
I was going to say,
who have
probably hundreds of thousands of people.
Yeah, that have given their life to their country. And, quite frankly, I think we need to look at this, and it's something we need to look at. And I wish the federal government, be honest with you, I think a lot of this stuff could be resolved if the federal government just could make the move to acknowledge that cannabis has some benefits and make it accessible and easier, so states don't have to struggle and people within states don't have to struggle. And we could lower the cost of this if the federal government would just take the barriers down on this. And We'll see. I mean, I think that, I'm not to get political or anything, but I think President Trump wanted to do that, but I think there were certain people in the party that forced them not to do it. And I think, I'm hoping that President Biden will look at this from a perspective of, hey, we need to finally do this. But we'll see. I mean, we'll see. I mean, that would help us tremendously, especially for those that, even with the medical marijuana, tax, forgiveness or whatever you want to call it, that you don't have to pay the taxes or the tax discount. It's still very expensive for a lot of people. And, it forces us to, if you can't afford it, go and buy it from places that are not, I don't want to say regulated, but are regulated. And we don't want that. We want to be able to help these folks get the right product, know what's in this product. These are people, especially veterans. I mean, they have given so much. Steve has given so much. His family has given so much. His wife has given so much. His mom, everybody gave so much just in that one instance, and multiply that times hundreds of thousands that have. And like I said, I have evolved on this. Steve knows I've evolved on this, and it's because of Steve. And this was an important committee that I requested to be assigned to, because I think there should be a Republican conservative approach to get our side on accepting this. And that's what I want to do.
Yeah, this
So,
is such.
it's interesting you brought up a political party, because if you look at the latest research on who is out there that is supporting federal legalization, again, party lines. And I appreciate the fact that you are willing to look at the science and the research. And I think Ann mentioned Dr. Marion McNabb, who's a friend of us all here, and has spearheaded a lot of the research and the pro-cannabis movement out there. Let me ask you a question as a representative. Who comes in to educate you about this product?
Steve.
In his spare time or what? I mean,
well,
and data.
I mean,
right.
There's a benefit. I have friend. Steve's a friend, and it's a benefit. And when I talk to other Republican colleagues, and I talk to a lot of colleagues, I talk about Steve's struggles, and I talk about that, and that's what got me to change, and how I evolved on it. And from a standpoint of facilities and things like that, it's something that you just got to look at. And I'm going to be straight up. I haven't used medical marijuana bombs and creams and things like that, but I've got some personal struggles health wise, and I've used CBD to the legal limit that you can sell over the counter without licenses and all that stuff. But it's I don't want to take painkillers, and I don't want to do those things because I know what it does to the human body. I talk to my doctors about these things, but it's hard because the doctors don't want to deal with it, and and there's a stigma with that.
Right.
There really is.
Doctors don't even want to deal with it at all. Okay.
Right.
Including my own PCP, who I have an issue with about this. And we get into it during my annual physical. He does not like it when he has to, whatever. So, but again, are you reading about the research? Are you proactively learning about the benefits of the plant? Because there's been so much research done in the last 2 years, and I try to absorb as much as I can. But I know you're friends with Stephen. I know you rely on Stephen, and Stephen's story is so compelling. Stephen remembers the day I met him. I'm pretty sure it was a historic day in Massachusetts. It was the first adult use recreational day at Captivate, when I heard his story, it boils my own blood when I hear these stories about veterans, especially being denied or having to come off opioids. Easy to get OxyContin at the VA, but you can't get a little weed. I mean, it just makes no sense in so many ways to me.
Yeah.
But I keep going back to, are you following the science and research that's been out there and available online? Every single day I get another survey and another research story.
Yeah, and I am,
Okay. Good.
I am. I'm out there doing what I got to do. Look at it. I am all about research. I'm all about investigating it. I'm all about looking at it. I'm open-minded to all of it. I think there's something to be said about this, and I think there's something to be said about tying this into opioid addiction. And if we can use cannabis in a way to get folks exit off of opioids, you know what? We all win. We absolutely all win.
Or even taking
and
less.
that's what we have to do.
Even taking less, being able to take 3 or 4 less pills a day, the what opioids do to your insides, just alone that you can get a disorder just from opioids to, with constipation and stuff like that. And those things are huge. But I just wanted to say, like, this is completely a bipartisan issue. Helping veterans, delivering on the government side of the contract for what we signed up for. This is a bipartisan issue. Saving lives and keeping families together it crosses all party lines. Like, it shouldn't matter. Mike, Representative Soda will admit that all of his turnaround came from education, and I was very intimidated at first. I'm like, all right, the view from my side was, it's a liberal thing for cannabis. So I'm one of the few people in the state where both my senator and my representative are Republican from the other side of the party. This is something I can't just throw my hands on and be like, oh, we're not gonna be able to work together. It's like, no, we got to find a way to work together. And that has been one of the most important things is educating and just informing them. And both Representative Soda and Senator Fatman here have both done 180s. And they'll credit me. I feel like all I did was deliver a message. I didn't discover this. This is a message that has been out there. And like he's saying, we got the wrong education on opioids from the industry, saying there was no risk, so you're good. And then we got the wrong education from cannabis. This is deadly. This is devastating, and no one should have access to it. There's no benefits. So we all kind of got duped here. So it's on us to really educate ourselves. And like Representative Soder was saying, there's tons of resources out there now. Like, you can look at peer-reviewed studies. You can look at research.
You can look at our study at cannabisadvancementseries.org that is 2019 and had veterans from 48 states participate and give feedback and share everything about it. So you can also refer to that, but also as civilians, being informed in the power of our voice and being a constituent and working with our local municipalities and local legislators at a state level. Representative Soder, what advice do you have? I know we have a couple minutes left I'm a childhood veteran. I have a brother-in-law who's serving overseas actively. I have in-laws that are veterans, but for us that are looking to support and enrich and understand and know that these pieces of legislation are out there, what can we do to help support and move the support, to move, I was going to say the needle in the right direction. That's not what I want to say, but to help these initiatives make a systemic and sustainable impact?
Well, I think education and talking to the reps and talking to all of us up there is key, and bringing the points and driving home the points is essential. And I think Steve is a great advocate for that. But Steve needs a lot of help from a lot of other veterans too, that believe in what he believes in. So I think that would be the key that we need to focus on. I think with this new leadership and Chairman Donahue coming in, I think you're going to see some different changes coming in, and I think you're going to see a lot of progress coming forward on cannabis. So,
and we can
Awesome.
provide public testimony, we can write in, we can offer a video, we can email. So we understand it's a process, a 13-step process to be exact. 2-year legislative period. So the the deadline was on February 19th here in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. We know that it's going to be about 2 years, and there's like this influx of hurry up and then we wait. And then this hurry up and wait, and to participate and support.
Yeah. And I got to be honest with you, the pandemic doesn't help with any of this. But I think, when Chairman Donahue sees that he's got some Republican support and bipartisanship, I think that helps with a lot of things too, moving things forward. So, that's what we hope for. So, and that's what we got to keep advocating for.
All right. Well, Representative Soder, I so appreciate, totally up to you. What we do now on this show is if you want to stick around and hear from other veterans that we have lined up. But you have a very busy schedule.
Yeah, I can't because today's my one of my final days for accepting co-sponsorships, and I'm doing that as we're talking. So if I could, I would love to go finish that. But listen, you guys
for that.
We thank you for your time.
You guys, you folks have a friend, and Steve is a good man, and we're ready to fight with you. Okay.
There you go. Thank you very much, Representative Michael Soder. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Massachusetts State Representative. We are going to take a break here at the top of the hour. When we come back, I know Ann is going to be here. We're going to be joined by a couple of guys from the Patriots Helping Vets organization and Roland Cordova from You Grow Rentals. He's calling in.
So I personally like QuickBooks for MRBs. I wouldn't necessarily suggest QuickBooks for a plant touching company. And the reason for that is QuickBooks is still a little iffy when it comes to having a plant touching business or even anything related to the cannabis world as one of their customers. What I typically do when I use QuickBooks for an MRB is I don't necessarily put the title of the company as a title that's obvious that it's an MRB. I'll put the name of the LLC if it's not the same name as the company. I'll create a fake name, then just change the financial statements when I go to print them out, because I don't want QuickBooks to shut my customers down or shut my account down either. But it's still one of the best tools out there for a small business to use. And it's something that I use to run my business. It's something I use to run some of the clubs and societies that I work with. And it's also what I really direct my MRBs to utilize as well for their books and records.
Hi, I'm Ben Shower, New England rep for Salient Video Management Systems. Let me tell you what makes us different in the security space. We're your trusted advisors for all your security needs. I know how complicated the regulations are in cannabis, and working with Salient Systems will be the polar opposite of that. I give free consultations and will walk you through every step of the process so that you can get what you need at the price you can afford. We're robust, we're simple and scalable. We're Salient Systems, your solutions to all your security needs. Please contact me at the information below, and I'm looking forward to being your trusted advisor.
Okay, we are back, ready to rock after our 420 break with Jonathan Edwards and Shanti. And joining us in our interview room for this half hour is Austin McDonough from Oregon and Hoi Polloi Advisory Group. And Austin, thank you so much for joining us here today.
Great to be with you. Thanks.
Now, in our travels and research, looking up data geeks, okay, I came upon you, and there in the LinkedIn profile, you call yourself the data sensei. So explain to us, please, what is the data sensei, and why are you so intrigued with data?
Well, I'm passionate about data, and my group Hoi Polloi knows that. And so this is the days where you pick your avatar or something along that lines. Inside my group and my company, we have the Hemp Huntress, we have the Fabulous One, and now we also have the Data Sensei. And they helped me get there with that. We tossed around a few things, and then this came. So that's how I got the name. It's pretty recent, so I'm owning it. I like it, and I am a data geek.
So David also shares his geekiness about data, and it was his idea to do this show on the data. And we are still waiting for one more person, hopefully, to show up. His name is Christian Valdez, and he's with Traffic Roots. But in the meantime, David, now is your time to explain and get into the real meat of the bone here. Go ahead. You gotta tell me he's got his microphone muted or not muted. What happened to him? Every time we go to him, we check his mic. It works fine. We hear his dogs in the background. When I toss it to him to ask a question, we can't hear him. Still nothing. We did try. I mean, we did test this, right?
Nope. We tested.
Oh, now we hear you.
Okay, so we're just going to go without the fancy microphone then.
Then fair enough. We hear you fine. That's the most important thing, as long as you stay right where you are. Great.
Well, Jimmy, before I jump into a question for Austin, let's welcome Christian. He looks like he's coming in.
That's right. And we look forward to talking with Christian.
Hey, guys.
Is he there?
I'm here, Jimmy. I can see you.
Great.
Right, can we get your video on so you can join our video production?
Let me put my makeup on. Hold on.
Austin, there he is. Thank you very much, Christian Valdez. All right, so before we go, David, now that we have you on, right? We hear you, David. Say hello.
Hello.
Good job.
All right.
Christian, give us a little background. Give us the elevator pitch about your company, Traffic Roots, and the role data plays in that.
Absolutely. So, Christian Valdez, I'm the CEO and founder of Traffic Roots. We are a digital advertising platform for CBD dispensaries, THC products. So what we do is we have the ability to place video, native, and banner ads on I think we're up to like 160,000 sites at the moment, programmatically. And that's in addition to the data platform that we have, in which we're able to do demographic targeting, geo-targeting, geo-conquesting, attribution, all that fun stuff to be able to identify your perfect audience for your brand. So that's kind of like the short and sweet. Hopefully that would help.
That's perfect. Okay, David, you're ready now. This is your show. Go ask those questions. Go ahead.
Here we go. Let's start with Austin. Austin, tell us, what kind of data do you aggregate, and who's typically looking at the data you put together? Who's your general customer?
Okay, fine. Thanks. Our data, we aggregate our data, or I do, from websites, CRMs, and our social media. I use the data, and those are big engines. Our website, and that's what we guide our customers is to you develop your website is for being able to generate a lot of information. So I analyze. I use, for example, the Google Analytics G4. I'm a big fan of the new generation G4, and we can drill down and we can look at, because our website's all about what we say is education, edutainment, and enjoyable, and it's crucial for an advisory services business to get a lot of people come through and take a look. And so we're constantly now taking a look at our efforts and measuring them against what the analytics say. The same thing, I guide our customers, and we are, oh, well, our business model is hoi polloi, which is Greek for, the common people, the everyday and the working class. And hoi polloi, works with small business. So we offer, small business startups, new packages to get started, and those stuck. And what we find is with that level of business and all, many just don't have any sense of the data that they need to have and what it's useful for. And I'm there to guide them, on all those things.
Okay. What kind of data do we need?
Well, you need data. You need data as far as your traffic in your website. You need to look at, again, with the G4, now you can drill down right down to what anybody even looked at, who they were. I mean, it's amazing stuff. And we need it because we're doing a lot of content on our website. We're like, well, is anybody looking at it? I mean, you want people to stay on your website. You want them to stick with you. You want them to be clicking on as many things that are available, and we have a pretty well-developed website. In the same way, if it translates into CRM, many have no idea. We work a lot with what we call solo entrepreneurs. I don't know if you've heard that word, solo entrepreneurs. That's a hot topic, and that's a lot in the small business world. We're working with people that might just be kind of their own shop, right? I mean, it's not only, or let's just say they're starting there and you have all hopes of getting larger. There are a lot of things that they can do. There's a lot of things they need to do. And data is important in many things, like and larger than that, especially if you're just if you have ideas about growing, if you have ideas about capital investment and angel funds and private investors, all that data leads into business plans and KPI and past. I mean, there's so many things that they lead into that they don't have a sense of, and it's okay. We have a saying, you don't know what you don't know. In my world and in Hoy's world, it's okay not to know. We say we don't know. That's why we're an advisory group. That's why we like to, have other, strategic partners that don't, that we can refer people to. I don't know about this. Let's go over there. But the data is something we talk about all day long and look at. And like I said, I'm kind of a geek in that sense, and I just like it. Now, let me tell you one thing about data. I'm long off the manual processes, long off doing all of, time is money, ROI, everything like that. So we're big on technology and tools as they apply. I mean, we mentioned Google a lot. We like Google a lot. I mean, there's other things out there, and you just have to really understand in your small business how much time you're taking. I mean, I have things like this, to tell me how many minutes I spent with somebody, and it's not like it's against them or anything. It's just like how many minutes are in a day, and data helps me. Good data, use of data, good looking at analytics and analysis and things like that help our company completely. We're a case. I mean, we help new businesses get started. We're a case study of a new business that's just gotten started since last fall. So it's nice to be able to say, here's what we do, and try to not always to recommend them.
Gotcha. Christian, talk a little bit about your product and how you collect your data and what differentiates what you guys do from others that are out there trying to do the same thing.
Good question. So our data it's a little bit different because it's customizable is the best word, in the sense where I'll give you a brief example. We had a CBD company that was pushing a beauty cream. So what we did through our data management platform, we were able to geo-frame all the Ulta Beauties and Sephora's across the US and identify the consumers that walked into the store on a rolling, I think it was a rolling 30-day period. So what we did with that data is we said, okay, here's the consumers that went to these retail locations, physically walked into these retail locations in the last 30 days. And then we grabbed that audience and then we ran advertising campaigns against those people. And that could be done. That's just a very basic example, but we could do that, and sticking with the CBD, because obviously that's a very hot topic. We could do that with country clubs. We could do that with golf clubs. We could do that with Costco's. We could do that with any physical retail location that you can align yourself with. In addition, that's a geo-framing kind of perspective. In addition, we could go demographic, something a little bit more broader, where you could say, I want females, I want males, 35 to 65, that live in these particular zip codes, these particular DMAs, make this amount of money, have these particular interests, and then you segment that audience. And when it comes to marketing and audiences, what you're really doing is confirming your assumptions. And what I mean by that is, you might think your audience is 45 to 65, but it might be different. And having that data, structuring the data properly to be aligned with your marketing campaign for your consumer to validate that is massive. Having the right checks and balances to do so is just as important. So on the data side, it's identifying, our data management tool is to be able to test your audiences, test your assumptions on who you think your audience is. And if you are correct, it's going to show results. It's going to show conversions. It's going to show engagement. And we track everything all the way from the video impression to the conversion. And we do utilize Google Analytics to determine time on site, bounce rate, organic increase from traffic, because they are correlated. Google's very selfish sometimes. And although it's paid media, I mean, consumers like you and I, we don't buy in a first click. I personally will go in there, check it out, see what it is. I'll click out and do my research, type it in, go back, and then eventually make a purchase. But with that kind of flow, Google categorizes it as organic traffic, and it's not necessarily directly organic traffic. So what we look at from that data perspective is, what are the benchmarks before you started with us? What kind of organic traffic were you getting? Bounce rate, time on site, all those basic metrics. And then we basically present that to our agencies and our clients that we work with. And we say, this is where you are now, and this is where we're looking to get you. Or look at the increase that you've gained from digital advertising and digital exposure. Advertising it's not a silver bullet at all. It's a process. And it's an ongoing process to refine and refine and refine what you're currently doing to identify your audience. If it was a silver bullet, Coca-Cola and Pepsi would have stopped advertising a long time ago.
Exactly.
Right.
Long time ago.
Go ahead, David. Your mic is on. Go.
Jimmy, I'm learning right now. You keep going with the questions.
Why is it that you come up with these theme shows and then you could constantly throw it back to me, right? To say, okay, great, David. I mean, all right, I got more questions. Look,
you keep going. I'll jump in when you're not doing a good job.
Oh, please, thanks. Again, more pressure on me, but that's fine. Let's talk a little bit about if I'm a cannabis company. Let's make it a non-vertical dispensary, okay, in a legal state. Okay. And we all know that means plus 21 is the target, because you can't get in the door without a plus 21 ID. Where would you start to identify what your typical customer looks like? Because to me, what's happening, and I keep hearing that this 50 plus demographic is the fastest growing demographic in the cannabis space, but who's creating the content to reach those people besides us, of course? So again, what do we do with that data? I'm going to start. Let me start with Christian. You hold on. I know you know the answer to this. Austin, if I come to you as a company, a dispensary, and I've got no vertical, I'm reliant on wholesale buying, but I'm in a high traffic area, how would you advise me to create a campaign to get people to come in my door?
Well, I would grab one of our other team members. I'm not exactly an expert in what would be effective. I can analyze if it was or weren't, but you're bringing up a good point about businesses that get stuck, or businesses like we are working with a dispensary right now. And I want to talk about this in an analytics and data field, that you had no idea that you could help somebody who was stuck, who have management problems, who a manager might be not happy with their wages. They might not be happy with how many direct reports they have. And so I've helped recently do some analysis on what's an appropriate wage for Oregon in a dispensary, and I've been done on what's the average number of direct reports that what's the number of hours that would be reasonable for retail managers in general, retail managers in the United States, and then in Oregon and in the dispensary world, to help them kind of show this to somebody so they can tell them you're paid real well in all these kind of metrics. And so that's one aspect I just did help, and I like doing those kinds of things. And I also do other things. So that's just one example from my own experience, how we use data, and they loved it. I mean, they were just so, and it was able to really help them, and it helped us get more business to do with them and later down the road, because they were like, wow, okay, this is great, and this really helped me.
Right. And I'm guessing you have an idea of what your typical cannabis consumer looks like and their specific behavior. So Christian, I come to you, I've got a dispensary, I don't have a vertical, I'm reliant on wholesale. Maybe I have the biggest variety in the legal state that I'm in, and I need to get that word out. How can we use your tool to do that?
Do you want me to tell you, or do you want me to show you? I can literally pull it up in 2 seconds here. It's on my other screen. I'll just screen share with you. Your call. You're the host.
No. Actually, I may be the host, but as you know, the host is only as good as his director, and Dan would have to make you the host and let you share the screen.
No, I think I could share it from screen, but I just want to make sure I'm not changing the dynamic of your show.
You control your little quadrant. What'd you say, Dan? If you can, go ahead, Christian. How's that?
It says host has disabled participating screen sharing. So no, I can't.
Okay. He just made you the host, so now you can do it. Don't forget to make Dan the host again, though, on the way back. Will you please?
Absolutely. So are you guys able to see the screen?
Yes, I can. Dan, are we good?
Yep, great.
Go ahead.
So we take a different approach in the sense where, as you can see here, this is Reef Dispensary in Las Vegas. So what we do is we'll geoframe and we'll create a report and send it to them prior to us working together. And what we do with this report, I think this is a 30-day, if I'm not mistaken, we're able to identify all the people that go to the dispensary. So as you can see here, there's been 12,000 unique people with a total visits of 33,000. And then
Christian,
we're able to go ahead.
If you don't mind me asking, can we just scroll back up a little bit?
Sure.
So how do you identify that there were 12,274 unique devices? You're measuring what, cell phones that come in?
Correct. Your beacon in your pocket.
Got it. Okay.
Yep. So therefore, we were able to identify exactly who's walking in. We can see the frequency obviously is approximately 2, more or less.
And over how long of a period?
I think this is a 30 or 60 days, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
We're able to identify what days of the week. And this is before we start running, by the way. So we're able to provide this report to them and say, this is a snapshot of who's going to your dispensary now.
Wow.
Because most of the time they don't know. So here you can see 5,000 people, 4,000 people, and this is on a weekly, on a day basis. So we can aggregate on a day. And then down here, we can actually go by hour. So as you can see, 2 p.m. is the peak for these particular dispensaries. To the far right, we can identify what zip codes people are coming from, driving from to the dispensary.
Oh, wow. So now,
go ahead.
I got 30,000 questions in my head. I think that's pretty cool. That you track it by the hours as well. I track this kind of information in Massachusetts by the weekdays, and I'm surprised how very similar it looks to what you have for these 2 locations in Vegas. How the table you were just talking about on the far right-hand side with the zip codes,
right here.
How do you know what their zip codes were?
Because we identify where their mobile ID is, and therefore their household ID. Everything's connected.
I see.
Right.
It's all picked up through basically your software follows the user of the phone and how they're using their apps on their phone. Correct?
Correct.
Christian?
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
So
see, I listened to you the first time we talked. I learned something. I definitely learned something. But so the question I have for you is, if I'm a savvy mobile phone user as opposed to David and myself, okay? Austin, I just got to know you, so I don't know, but I'm going to guess you're more savvy than both David and myself. Can't I just turn off all my notifications, all my location things, and doesn't that immediately wipe out any place I go, or can you still track on the phone?
I think there's still a way. I'm not a developer, so I wouldn't be able to give you an exact answer. But there's still a method of tracking, one way or another. I mean, if that's the case, throw your phone away. You know, go back to a flip phone. And even then, I still think you could probably track a flip phone, honestly. So,
David, did you have a flip phone? Did you have a flip phone, David?
Oh yeah, Jimmy, I still have a flip phone. That's
They're
not
coming back. They're coming back.
That's right.
You guys remember the Razor? The Razor,
right.
They used to be one of my favorite flip phones. Now they're coming back and they have a flip phone with the screen when you flip it up, which is great.
Now, Christian, one of the neat things that you showed me on the demo when I saw this is your ability to literally target one side of a convention center to the other and send out different messaging to two different locations in the same building, right?
Yes. So we can segment if there's two conferences going on at the same time. We could basically segment into two geoframes. So just to provide a little bit more insight, you could go down to gender, children, no children, income. So you could see exactly what you're referring to. And as you guys were saying, 45 to 49, 50 to 54, you guys were absolutely right. Like, this is the majority of the traffic coming to these dispensaries. And this is in Vegas.
Yeah.
So, and even to the point where you could see interests. Yeah, this is a lot of the same information, but the bigger portion is down here.
Wow.
Charitable events, distribution, what kind of interest, media source. And these are all custom audiences that we can create. I think what you were asking me about, Jimmy, was something like this, where we're able to create a geoframe.
Yeah, it's the geofencing that I found most fascinating. But I guess that a lot of people can do. Are there a lot of companies out there that do this, Christian? It's not unique to this product, right?
The geofencing?
I'm pretty sure there is.
Yeah.
The geofencing is not new.
Look at this. Here we go.
Nice.
Austin, you like this, right?
Oh yeah, of course.
So we could basically say, okay, for this convention, it's only going to be in this wing. So then we could say, all right, block off only that section of the convention.
Boy,
and then I could go basically 12 months back and identify people in that area. So it's not forward, it's backwards as well. So
I like it.
Now, when you say, if you're going backwards, that means you had to have captured and retained the data, or you're going into a database somewhere.
Exactly right. Both.
Both. So, like, how is it that you're constantly capturing the data that's going on in there?
Because you have a big beacon on your phone that's constantly transmitting, and everything is being archived from your cell phone company and your apps.
But
we can identify longitude and latitude at any given time in the 12-month period back.
But do you have hardware that is in place at the Las Vegas Convention Center?
You have it in your pocket. That's all we need.
So now the biggest question, the elephant in the room is, how much of an invasion of privacy is this being considered? And isn't there movements now to eliminate some of the data that's being captured by these phones?
So it is anonymous data. We're not getting people's names or emails or phone numbers or anything like that. Everything is completely encrypted, and it's anonymous. That's the truth of it.
Okay.
Is there movement to go away with cookies? Yes, this is actually cookieless solution that we're working with. So although cookies are going to be impacted, it's not going to be as impacted with something like this.
Can you reach out to the customers that you're tracking?
In what sense?
In, like, if you wanted to send everybody a message?
Yeah.
No.
No.
No, because you don't have their cell phone numbers.
Got it. Okay.
That's kind of what Jimmy was asking about privacy. You don't have a person's name. You don't have a person's email, phone number, none of that. That's privacy violations.
No, I'm just looking at
like in Oregon dispensaries, there's different OLCC rules, state rules that that prohibit collecting those things directly inside the dispensary. It just depends state to state what's allowed. Each state has its own model, and they're really concerned about privacy on the inside of dispensaries.
Yeah, exactly. So there's a lot that could be done with this, and it's great.
Oh,
it's awesome.
Christian, I thought of one thing is that a massive amount of people come over from Idaho into our fine state. And if you were on the front edge or early edge of this kind of thing, you could say, whoa, we got a lot of these, and maybe we need to start doing a little more reach out, maybe even a giant sign, welcome to Oregon, Idaho fans. And I think there probably is now, but not 7 years ago. And also just getting people behind it, like in your ownership and stuff. Let's spend some money to go after Idaho.
And that's the thing. It's like, for example, Vegas is a great example. Nobody's really from Vegas, hypothetically. You know what I mean? And actually, it's on the map. I don't know if you noticed, it's scattered. Like there's a bunch of green dots from that audience because everybody goes back to their hometowns. So even then, the system is not biased to, I'm only going to show you an ad when you're in Vegas. No, they're basically, we're going to be able to track them and basically send them retargeting ads one way or another. So we know that there's an interest. We will keep showing you the CBD brand or the dispensary or whatever, and you'll engage with them.
There you go.
So
David,
how do I give Dan back his
go
permission?
back and just make him the host again.
I got it. I think I got it here. Okay.
I know how. I think you know how to do that.
Yep. I think I got
and I appreciate you remembering that part of it.
Yeah, no worries.
Hey, Christian,
otherwise, you're going to direct the rest of the show.
Can I say something, Christian? One thing is this spectacular growth in all of these aspects. I mean, when I started in the industry and actually having a career in it back in 2015 here in Oregon, I never foresaw. My role that I have today, or the need for all these, or let's just say the industry kind of grew up. 7 years, and it's just amazing where you have to be. To be competitive on all these aspects. Thank you for what you're doing.
It's crazy. So you have to be. That's exactly right. You have to be competitive. You have to be one step ahead of this. And honestly, this is standard practice in mainstream. This isn't new. Like this isn't.
Right.
We're not inventing the wheel. We're just applying it to a different industry. That's really it.
But
and there's different data is data. There's different sets of data. Obviously, I know Gary Allen's going to join us later on. He's a good friend of mine, and he also has some data that has a different perspective on it. But you have to be able to test the different sources of data to see exactly what's working for you. I think testing is the key word when it comes to data, aggregating. That's you're just learning who your client is, and you're learning what to do with it and how to optimize it and how to maximize your marketing dollars. Marketing has been an evolution where it's a visual capture merged with a data analytics and psychology behind it. So my definition of marketing is literally that: graphic design meets kind of brand psychology meets analytics, because you kind of throw those into a mixing pot, you blend it all together, and then that's what you get for digital marketing, digital advertising.
That's it. Makes it so simple. It's funny. Basically, data gives you knowledge, right? And going back to my days of Animal House, I remember that Dean Faber statute: knowledge is good, right?
Yes.
So the more data you have, the more knowledge you have in order
Correct.
to provide the product or the service messaging to your core targeted consumer, right?
That's exactly right.
Right. And so I could get the big picture, but when you guys start talking about the different categories and I just forget it. Right over my head. I'm too old school TV broadcast guy, I guess. David, do you have one last question you'd like to ask either of these people before we take our 5 o'clock break?
Yes. My head is spinning with questions right now for Kristen, because I'm finding this fascinating. Here's the part I'm still wrestling with. So I watched you draw the picture around that particular convention hall at the Las Vegas Convention Center. And you said you can get the data from any point in time, but where do you, here's where I'm struggling. I would think you either need to have a piece of hardware there that collects it, or there's got to be something that's collecting it that you're logging into to be able to download it.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Your phone tracks everything. Your apps
Yep.
archive everything. That's the
But
truth.
how are you able to capture that data if it's in everybody's phone?
Well, no, there's a central database where all that goes to, and there's different data partners that come in. So you have location targeting, you have audience targeting, you have demographics. You blend it all into a big bucket, and you filter out what you need. That's exactly what you're doing here. You're filtering based on data points.
There you go. Does that make you feel better, David? Will you be able to sleep at night?
Now I understand it. I still think it's fascinating.
It is. I told you, I'm really glad, Christian, that you grabbed hold of control of the show and threw that up there, because that's a great demo. I knew it would open up David's eyes. It opened up my eyes, and I was fascinated by it as well. But you know who we have coming on. You just mentioned your friend. Is it Gary? It's Gary Allen, right?
Yeah, Gary Allen's good. I know Chris Walsh as well through just industry
Chris Walsh,
stuff. But yeah,
the CEO of MJ Biz Daily, is coming on with us as well in the next hour. So I want to thank you both for joining us today, kind of getting this whole data thing off the ground. And now we'll see where we go from here. But for Austin and for Christian, again, thank you so much for joining us. David and I will be back with a whole new room of guests after this break. So don't go away. The Green Rush Live continues after this. Hi. Jimmy Young here, and I have to ask you, are you secure? If you're in the cannabis industry, you have to have security for your grow facility or dispensary. And we are so happy to welcome Salient Systems to our group of supporters. You get to call their rep. His name is Ben Shower at SalientSys.com. So don't even wait an hour. Call Ben Shower at 413-333-7974.
I really enjoy what I do. There's a couple different reasons for it. First of all, I've always been an accountant, and it's kind of a nerdy thing to say, but I do love accounting. And I also love helping companies. I love helping people build their companies, especially small to mid-sized startups. I've always been someone that's, in all my roles in industry, it's always been building teams, building companies, building departments. And to be honest, I love working for myself and owning my own company. So I love what I do every day.
Coming up on We Talk News this week, democracy takes a hit in Mississippi as the Supreme Court there nullifies the voters' wishes to bring a medicinal marijuana law to that state. Is Connecticut on the verge of legalization for adult use? A President Biden appointee to the IRS puts cannabis businesses in his crosshairs for investigations. And the race to a host agreement was slow and steady for the Emerald Turtle Delivery Service in the Bay State, but there's one happy couple in Massachusetts on We Talk News next.
We are Pro Cannabis Media.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to this week's edition of Weed Talk News. I'm Jimmy Young with Pro Cannabis Media. So, have you submitted your cannabis story yet on our website? Come on, come out of the cannabis closet and share what role cannabis has played in your life. Well, we've already had quite a few incredible stories, and you could win with PCM. Plus, we're now live streaming 24/7 on procannabismedia.com. So now it's time for the news. And this week was the week that the MORE Act, which legalizes cannabis federally, was going to be reintroduced. It didn't, though. And now it should be next week. Now, there are all sorts of backdoor meetings going on in Washington, D.C. now, and cannabis could end up being part of the deal regarding the budget. only in America. Speaking of our great country, as interesting as what is going on federally with the cannabis reform movement in D.C., there's a disturbing trend at the state level, specifically in Mississippi. A week ago, the state Supreme Court of Mississippi decided that voters of that state don't matter. You see, on Election Day, 74% of Mississippi voters went to the polls and said yes to legalizing a medical marijuana program. Last week, the Supreme Court of Mississippi said that vote was null and void. Needless to say, this week, there were demonstrations at the Supreme Court of Mississippi protesting that court's decision. Dr. Dave Allen, a retired cardiovascular surgeon, is an outspoken proponent of the powers of cannabis as a medicine, and he has written Initiative 77 that would legalize all cannabis use in that state.
I think, first off, that the Supreme Court doesn't have jurisdiction over changing the law that the people vote for. And that this is a constitutional right, that the right people have a right to do initiatives.
Yeah.
Do initiatives so that they can change law that governs the people.
Sounds like it's democracy is what they have the right to do, right? That's the last time I checked anyway, right?
It's an attack on democracy. I agree. The Supreme Court doesn't have jurisdiction over the people. That's my issue with this.
To find out about Initiative 77 in Mississippi, check out their Facebook page and increase their support. It's obvious that state has a few issues. Dr. Dave Allen is my guest on this week's In the Weeds, so don't miss that. Now, next up, is legalization coming to the state of Connecticut? It could happen next week. Their governor, Ned Lamont, recognizes that there are just a few issues that still remain, but believes it can all get worked out over the next 7 days before this current legislative session is done. Now, with the story from Wall Street in New York, here's the Green Market Report's Deborah Borchardt.
I'm Deborah Borchardt, and this is the Weed Talk News business update from the Green Market Report. Air Wellness reported its financial results for the quarter ending in March. Revenue rose 74% to $58 million. The company also trimmed its net losses slightly to $8.4 million. They did say in the second quarter, though, they expect revenues to be over $90 million. Forefront Ventures reported their first quarter total revenues came in at $22 million, way better than last year's $12 million. The net losses, though, increased from $7 million to $11 million. They did reiterate their fiscal year guidance for pro forma revenue in the range of $170 to $180 million. And finally, Hemp Fusion Wellness is buying the CBD company Sagely Enterprises in a deal valued at $25 million. You may know them as Sagely Naturals. They're sold in stores such as CVS and Rite Aid. Their products are available in over 14,000 retail locations. As a reminder, markets will be closed on Monday in celebration of the Memorial holiday.
One more note from New York, Delta-8 THC has now been banned by that state, and this is the form of intoxicating chemical in the hemp plant that, well, it's not as powerful as the real one, let's just say, and many CBD manufacturers and retailers were relying on Delta-8 to create their CBD products. One of those retailers, Empire CBD, that had 6 stores in New York, well, they've all closed their operations and moved to Florida. Now, let's head to the Midwest to find out what's going on in Michigan. Only one guy to talk about that, our own Cannacaster, Rick Thompson. Rick?
Well, this is the Michigan Report with Rick Thompson on Weed Talk News. Let's begin. The Michigan Cannabis Manufacturers Association had a really bad week, which follows a previous really bad week of public relations debacles. As a result, the MCMA website is down, meaning they made it unavailable for public viewing. On Monday, their president quit and withdrew his company from the trade organization. And yesterday, a message from MCMA member Flourish revealed the trade group has 13 members, but only 6 of them are willing to be publicly known. As of today, fumble-fingered spokesman Steve Linder is not doing interviews. Their website is still closed to you and I. Their member list is a mystery, and they are losing members. Whoever's making those boycott memes has expanded the list to include brands sold at these retailers, and I hear some companies are already pulling their products from MCMA stores. The trade association, which says its members are the Fords and General Motors of the cannabis industry, is imploding and possibly taking down some of those businesses. And that is big news. Also happening in Michigan, a bill to re-energize the roadside trusting of drivers for drugs is being debated. The bill would expand the types of samples an officer can collect in pursuit of an investigation of drugged driving if technology becomes available in the future. This seems like a response to the recent challenges made to the data master test for alcohol, which is inaccurate and often improperly used, and the poor results seen in the oral swab test for cannabis and opioids. Officers' suspicions of intoxication were wrong 24% of the time oral swabs were used, and 12% of the time when swabs indicated the presence of intoxicants, blood tests showed it was actually negative. This bill is in the House Judiciary Committee. The bill to set a 5 nanogram THC driving limit is in the House Rules and Competitiveness Committee. Neither has a scheduled reading as of this broadcast. And that's it for the Michigan Report. I'm Rick Thompson, reporting for Weed Talk News.
Another Midwest state that is rocking its new cannabis market is Illinois. Not only are they setting sales records just about every month, but now they're actually might be doing the right thing for social equity applicants. They came under a lot of criticism for the first wave of licenses doled out, but now a new bill that just passed the House there will address those omissions through 2 lotteries. 115 licenses will be up for grabs for social equity applicants, and it includes 5 medical licenses. Now let's check out what's going on back here in New England with Vermont's green nurse, Jessie Lynn Dolan. Jessie Lynn?
Thanks, Jimmy. I'm Jessie Lynn Dolan from Nurse Grown Organics and Vermont Cannabis Nurses, and this is the Weed Talk News Vermont Report. Vermont's brand new Cannabis Control Board gathered yesterday for its inaugural meeting. Commissioner James Pepper and board members Julie Hubbard and Kyle Harris introduced themselves and their vision for the Vermont cannabis industry. They acknowledged the long and arduous process we continue to endure as policies and reforms take place for both the adult and medical cannabis programs. During the meeting, Vermont's Executive Director of Racial Equity, Susanna Davis, spoke at length about the importance of equity in cannabis policy and how to include that as the state forges ahead. Future meetings will continue to be open to the public with minimal time allotted for public comment, but the new Cannabis Control Board's website does include a form for public input and questions. Under current legislation, the target date to open retail stores is October of 2022, but lawmakers continue to worry that could be delayed because of the time Governor Scott took to appoint the Cannabis Control Board. Speaking of our governor, Vermont's latest cannabis bill is on his desk waiting to be signed into law. The bill would create the Cannabis Business Development Fund, a system that provides loans and grants to social equity applicants. It would also introduce stricter advertising restrictions for cannabis businesses. Representative Arthur Peterson's attempt to tighten restrictions on towns that will allow cannabis businesses was shut down. Peterson's quotable quote from the news was, "As you all know, cannabis has THC in it, which is a dangerous drug." Another example of a legislator who needs just a little more education about THC, a chemical inside a plant called cannabis. A few months ago, folks in Woodstock, one of Vermont's cuter little towns, recognized they needed to get educated about cannabis. So they created a committee to provide the type of education needed in order to make an informed decision about whether or not to opt in and allow cannabis retailers in their community. The committee had asked for details on cannabis and youth, tourism, health, and taxes. Now the information will be presented to the village trustees on June 8th and to the town select board on June 15th. That's the Vermont Report for Weed Talk News. I'm Vermont's cannabis nurse, Jessie Lynn Dolan.
Whoopi Goldberg is coming to Massachusetts. Well, at least her celebrity cannabis brand called Emma and Clyde is. It's named after the talk show host and actress's late parents. Now you can find her brand in the dispensary Hubcraft in East Hampton. Since they grow it in Fitchburg, there's a chance it might be in a dispensary near you in the near future. Anybody want to review all those celebrity strains? 1 week it's Garcia handpicked, then it's Tommy Chong's Choice, Cookies and Burner. Now it's time for Whoopi's brand. And now for the rest of the news from the Bay State, here's our new Cannacaster, Ron Marshalsea.
Hello, I'm Ron Marshalsea, and I am here with the Massachusetts Cannabis Report for Weed Talk News. This week, our top story comes from Wareham, Massachusetts. That's where Aaron and Janelle Goins, owners of the Emerald Turtle, have become the second Black-owned cannabis delivery operator to receive an HCA, a host community agreement, in Massachusetts. The Emerald Turtle is a wholesale cannabis delivery, cultivation, and product manufacturing company based out of Wareham. They're allowed to sell things like tinctures and edibles made from their own or other wholesalers' cannabis, and Aaron Goins said that the South Shore would be their primary delivery area. When you apply for a cannabis license to operate in any town or city in Massachusetts, you must first have a host community agreement, and your license application will not be reviewed until you obtain it. The host communities have the right to ask the operator for extra so-called impact fees, which can be up to 3% of their annual revenues. These fees are supposed to cover the perceived extra cost of cannabis companies doing business in the city or town. One example of these extra impact fees is the presence of extra police officers for traffic or security. This week in Haverhill, a Superior Court judge ruled that a cannabis retailer, STEM, must pay $356,000 in community impact fees to the town. The lawsuit filed by STEM argues that they have the right to withhold the fee until Haverhill officials show how the store was affecting the town and what was needed to compensate the city for those impacts. The lawsuit continues, and a STEM victory will have a major impact on Massachusetts cannabis retailers, which have accused local officials of abusing the host community agreements for monetary gain. An attorney for the city of Haverhill argued that the fee should be paid first, and the details on how the money is spent can be provided later. Finally, a study out of the University of Massachusetts Boston shows that cannabis companies in Massachusetts have paid at least $2.46 million in fees, more than the 3% of lawfully collected fees allowed under host community agreements. After this study, lawmakers are considering measures to heighten oversight and enforcement of the agreements. Business and other advocates have long argued that municipalities have demanded the maximum of 3% of companies' gross sales without any evidence of need or actual costs. David O'Brien, the president and CEO of the Massachusetts Cannabis Business Association, says the Commonwealth's failure to clearly enforce the laws around HCAs has resulted in a regulatory state where legalized extortion is the norm. One town in Massachusetts that has waived those 3% fees is Northampton, where the outgoing mayor didn't see any reason to treat cannabis companies differently than any other businesses in his city. That's this week's Massachusetts Cannabis Report. For Weed Talk News, I'm Ron Marshalsea.
In that story, you heard about Aaron and Janelle Goins, the owners of the Emerald Turtle delivery service. Now, I got a chance to talk with Aaron about this long and winding road in Massachusetts that we call the host community agreement. Needless to say, there's a huge sense of relief in the Goins household.
I think my wife clapped when the vote during the actual meeting with the selectmen board. We were unanimously approved for a cultivation, product manufacturing, and a delivery operator license. I think she immediately clapped and then started crying. And then it continued even after we got off the call. It was an emotional dump. This has been I guess a passion of just love. I just can't think of this process, and people really don't understand, unless if you've been in this, just how difficult it is. I mean, we started this whole thing 2 years ago with bouncing around from town to town, even our own town that we live in, which is Abington. A month before the moratorium lifted, we went to town hall. What's the process to apply for application? We had large entities coming in here 5 months prior. I'm like, how's that possible? Your moratorium doesn't lift until the end of June. We're here in May. And I said, well, we've lived here for 15 years. Shouldn't we get some sort of consideration as stakeholders in the community? They said, no, town lawyers said first in, first served. So then we hopped over to another town, I think Halifax, and then Rockland, and you kept on hitting limits. And then you had the landlords. They always, second you say it's cannabis, well, here's a 400% premium thrown on top of that. And they know that they have you because you're referring to that small little sliver of the marijuana overlay district. So the only thing I could say is this has been a heck of a process, a lot of personal money thrown at this, well into six figures. It's, not a rich person, but man, I really wish I could have my money back, because a lot of it was wasted just hopping from town to town and thinking that you're going through a process. So it's a big day. I think we're maybe one of three, maybe four delivery operators in the state to give their HCA. And to my understanding, the delivery operator application should be coming out any day now. And we're going to be ready for when that happens.
Now the application process for the actual license begins, and Aaron is hopeful that delivery can begin within a year. But nothing is easy in the cannabis business. Now we turn to Washington, D.C., where every time you think you will see something positive, you hear something negative. Although in this case, it's really no surprise. Why? Because it has to do with President Biden's appointee to the IRS, who said this week he supports investigating cannabis companies. No surprise there. For the rest of the news out of our nation's capital, here's our D.C. report with Vote Pro Podcast, Phil Adams. Phil.
Hi, I'm Phil Adams with Vote Pro Podcast, and this is the Weed Talk News DC report. DC Congressional Delegate Eleanor Holmes Norton sent a letter this week to Housing and Urban Development Secretary Marcia Fudge, urging executive discretion in enforcing cannabis prohibition. Specifically, Holmes is asking HUD to stop evicting people from federally assisted housing for using cannabis in states where it's legal. In the letter, Holmes said such individuals, quote, should not be denied admission or face eviction for using a legal product. Holmes requested that Fudge respond in writing by June 21st. Tax revenues from cannabis sales in states where adult use is legal has totaled nearly $8 billion since 2014. In a report published by the DC-based Marijuana Policy Project, revenues from adult use sales topped $2.7 billion in 2020 alone. In a press release, MPP's Jared Moffitt pointed out that not only are states benefiting from a regulated market and fewer drug arrests, they're also benefiting financially. Moffitt said, quote, legalizing cannabis for adults has proven to be a wise investment. In February, the U.S. Census Bureau announced it would begin compiling its own data on state revenues from legal cannabis. A new Department of Education report shows state legalization of cannabis has produced no increase in use among young people. According to the report released by the department's National Center for Education Statistics, the percentage of students grades 9 through 12 who reported using cannabis at least once in the past 30 days shows, quote, no measurable difference between 2009 and 2019. The data shows that the percentage peaked back in 2011, a year before Colorado became the first state to legalize cannabis for adult use. The report also showed no difference in the percentage of students reporting the availability of drugs on school property. The data comports with a separate survey conducted by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention last year, which showed an overall decline in high school students' use of marijuana since 2013. That's the Weed Talk News DC report for this week. I'm Phil Adams from Vote Pro Podcast.
In New Jersey, according to a new poll by Monmouth University, the quality of life in New Jersey has not been affected by the decriminalization of cannabis. Of course, sales have not begun yet, but the process towards adult use stores and dispensaries is beginning. Here's Blazin' Bakery's Tara Masu Sargente with the New Jersey Report. Tara?
I'm Tara Masu for Blazin' Bakery, and this is the New Jersey Report for Weed Talk News. New Jersey's 18th dispensary opened this week, Ascend in Rochelle Park. Boston-based MSO Ascend Wellness Holdings already operates in 5 states. This is their second location, the first being in Montclair, when they acquired Greenleaf, which was New Jersey's first dispensary, opened in 2012 by Julio Valentin and Joe Stevens. The new dispensary is 6,000 square feet and employs 65 people. It is, of course, as all New Jersey dispensaries, medical only with limited offerings, but likely will get grandfathered into adult use later this year. Monmouth University put out a poll asking people if their quality of life had changed since cannabis had been legalized. Interestingly enough, half the people polled didn't know cannabis had been legalized. Of those who did, 86% said no change, 4% said it got worse, and 6% said it got better. The lack of awareness that anything has changed has been really, I guess, because it hasn't. While we're waiting for the regulations in place, the status quo has pretty much been maintained, though things have lightened up a bit. However, I think for the 100 people getting arrested every day who are no longer, life has improved greatly. I'm Tara Masu from Blazin' Bakery, and this has been the New Jersey Report for Weed Talk News.
Now here's the rest of the cannabis news from this week in what we call McCannabis news style. You might call it headline news. Colorado has now increased its possession limit from 1 ounce to 2 ounces. That now goes to the governor's desk for signature. Las Vegas, Nevada has waived its pandemic limits on in-person events. That means MJ BizCon is ready to rock in October. Overseas, 2 European nations are entering the medical cannabis space for growing and distribution. That's Greece and Denmark. And finally, a feel-good story about a pardon for a doctor in Pennsylvania who spent 6 months in jail and lost his career for growing cannabis for his sick wife. Dr. Paul Ezel lost his license to practice medicine after getting busted for growing weed to help his sick wife rid herself of opioids. Pennsylvania Governor Tom Wolf pardoned the ophthalmologist, who will now have his record expunged and his license to practice restored. Lieutenant Governor John Fetterman's statement says it all. Here's a doctor of 30 years who has had not so much as a speeding ticket, and then his whole life was ruined for giving his wife medicine that's now legal in Pennsylvania. This is a prime example of the destructive power of reefer madness. Cases like this illustrate why we must end marijuana prohibition before it destroys one more life. Unquote, and amen to that. That's this week's Weed Talk News. I'm Jimmy Young. Remember, it's a whole new world of weed out there. Use it responsibly, especially over this Memorial Day weekend.
Weed Talk and In the Weeds are 2 productions of Pro Cannabis Media supported by Revolutionary Clinics, one of the top medical cannabis dispensaries in the Massachusetts area, now with 3 locations in Greater Boston, 2 in Cambridge and 1 on Broadway in Somerville. Rev Clinics has a patient-first mission. They will customize your needs as a medical patient with the proper titration and combination of strains, flavors, and products. Rev Clinics, where the patient comes first.
Hi, I'm Ben Shire, New England rep for Salient Video Management Systems. Let me tell you what makes us different in the security space. We're your trusted advisors for all your security needs. I know how complicated the regulations are in cannabis, and working with Salient Systems will be the polar opposite of that. I give free consultations and will walk you through every step of the process so that you can get what you need at the price you can afford. We're robust, we're simple and scalable. We're Salient Systems, your solutions to all your security needs. Please contact me at the information below, and I'm looking forward to being your trusted advisor.
Pro Cannabis Media programming is available live and on demand on our Facebook page at Pro Canna Media, on Instagram at Pro Cannabis Media, on LinkedIn also at Pro Cannabis Media, on YouTube and YouTube Live on Pro Cannabis Media, Twitter at Pro Canna Media, and on Twitch.tv